Parshas Masei includes a very interesting and unusual mitzvah, which is the mitzvah of Miklat, which is the rule that if a person commits murder by accident, they have to be exiled into one of these cities, which will protect them from an avenger of the blood of the deceased, but is also a mitzvah that this accidental murderer must stay in the Miklat until the death of the Kohen Gadol, and he must stay in that city until that time as his atonement for his crime. And I'd like to focus on just two very unusual things about Miklat. The first is that it's such an unusual punishment. We would say that if a person needs atonement, prison, Miklat, although the idea of a quarantine in a city is a little bit more familiar to us today, is it a punishment or not? Why must he stay for so long in the city, but yet doesn't necessarily need to suffer in the city, which could be a very comfortable place to live? And secondly, why is it tied to the death of the Kohen Gadol? It seems to be a very random time of sentencing. And many Mefarshim have struggled with this, and I'd like to suggest a thought about it. And I think it's important to consider that Miklat really has a double function. On the one hand, the person who killed by accident needs atonement to the extent that human life is the most important value. Taking away human life because of some carelessness requires reflection and tshuva to repair one's mistake of perhaps not taking the life of another person as carefully as should have been. But there's also another side to the story, which is that if a person kills someone by accident, that carries with it a tremendous amount of guilt and suffering on the part of the person who did this action. And to the extent that it's an accident, the person nevertheless feels incredible guilt, even if they know that it wasn't their fault, that they carry with them for a very long time. And it could be that the Miklat is not only to atone, but also to try to resolve that guilt. And they need some measure of punishment in order to help alleviate that guilt. And perhaps Miklat was chosen in particular because when he comes to the Miklat, what he'll find there is other people who are silently suffering from the same situation and the same guilt. And perhaps they'll find each other and comfort each other and help each other to rehabilitate themselves. And the question of why do we choose the life of the Kohen Gadol to be the term of a sentence is indeed a difficult question. And I think that and it's really significant that sentence could be 1 minute or it could be the rest of his life. And I think that part of this is to teach us that there's something that's out of our control. If a person is sentenced to prison time, it's very important that they know when the end of the term is, so it's predictable and they know what it is. No one could ever be sentenced to an indefinite amount of time. We'll let you know later when your sentence is over. But here, the accidental murderer needs to be reminded of the fact that there's a certain amount, there's a component of life that's out of our control, that we can't control everything, even though we like to think that we are in control and we take responsibility for our actions as if we are in control. But there are certain things that are beyond our control. And therefore, his sentence is tied to another event which is completely unknown when it will be, to remind us that although we should take responsibility for our actions and behave as if we're in control of the things that we do, we should realize that sometimes things are out of our control and maybe it was guided by God, and we can't take guilt for every single thing that we've ever done. And this is really a lesson not only for this particular person, but for all of us to really take full responsibility over the choices we make, but also recognize that some parts of life are out of our control, and we need to be able to accept that in order that we don't live in the guilt of everything that we do. This balance is really the essence of what it means to be a religious person and a believer in God, in that we have all of our mitzvot that we're responsible to do, but we also realize the limitations of human effort in the world and realize that God is a very important part of our lives, and thinking about that will enable God to pervade our thinking and our feelings. A good Shabbos.